Right, now I'm going to talk about supply side policies. We've talked about fiscal policies, which are considered demand side policies, and also monetary policies. Now we're talking about supply side policies, obviously, are policies which influence the aggregate supply. By changing the aggregate supply, we can really have an influence on employment, inflation, GDP, lots of things. It can be a bit confusing because there are some supply side policies which you can put into demand side policies. For example, spending on education is considered a supply side policy because it's intended to increase the supply, but this obviously could be a fiscal policy, increasing spending. But it's to do with the intention, really. The government intends to have the policy to change the supply. It's a supply side policy. If the intention is to change demand, it could be a demand side policy. A fiscal policy could be instead of supply side. Okay, so yeah, like I said, the objective of supply side policy is to increase the long-term supply, aggregate supply. Remember, we want to increase the supply, not decrease it, so our policy wouldn't be to decrease supply. And that's done through workings of product and factor markets. We're talking about factors of production here. So by increasing productivity, able to produce more. Anything that improves productivity would be a supply side policy. But it could be maybe you increase the supply of labour by increasing the retirement age. That could be a supply side policy. And that is a factor of production, isn't it? The labour. So sometimes the government should intervene. It would be better to reduce, or it would be better for the government to intervene. Other times it's better to reduce intervention. It all depends on how successful the market mechanisms are. Some supply side tools are spending on education. We know, if you spend on education and training, you're going to get more productivity, but also you're going to attract businesses from abroad. This is a factor of production as well, isn't it? Enterprise. You're going to attract different organizations. If Italians can speak English, then maybe Google will come to Italy and set up its head office here. So really developing your human resources can really help increase your supply, aggregate supply. Infrastructure development. Here we're looking at infrastructures, especially things like transportation. There was a big polemic about TAV in Italy, but that was a supply side policy. It was intended to develop the infrastructure, so people maybe could find opportunities in France to deliver produce better, get produce to the markets, etc. So that, maybe also with cheaper energy or something, by developing your renewable energy infrastructure, that should bring energy prices down and have an impact on supply, increase supply, etc., etc. Technological improvement, that's very important at the moment, isn't it? So by improving technologically, supplies can go up. We know robots can increase their productivity. If you've got a better, higher generation of robot, maybe they can produce faster and better and more reliably, etc. Cuts in corporate tax and cuts in income tax. This we can see in also in the fiscal policy, but this can be a supply side policy if the intention is to get businesses to invest more. Maybe they attract more businesses from abroad. Ireland attracted so much businesses, so many multinationals went to Ireland because they had such a low corporate tax. That obviously increases the supply. The enterprise, very important. But generally, it does mean the market can work better and produce more if it's not leaking too much tax. So money's not going out of it too much, it can be reinvested. And the same in income tax. People are very incentivized if they have low income taxes. If we look at low income tax countries like America compared to Italy, people work much harder in America. In Italy, you can enter different tax brackets. If you do overtime, if you do extra work, maybe it's not worth it because you go into a higher tax bracket and end up paying 80% to the government in tax. So cuts in income tax can really mean people work harder, and so will produce more, will increase supply. Privatisation, that's been used a lot over recent years, especially it was started in the United Kingdom, because we know private organisations must compete and must try to survive, and they're very motivated towards profit, so they tend to produce more. They have a tendency to increase productivity. So that's another common policy, supply side policy. Deregulation is another one, but used a lot in England. Lots of things are regulated, whether it's for the environment, to protect the workers, or to protect the consumers. But by reducing this deregulation, obviously there needs to be regulation, but if any regulation can be made simpler or even reduced, it does have an effect of increasing production. If it's very difficult to employ people because there's a lot of regulation, a lot of protections, then maybe businesses won't expand or won't invest so much because of this, because of the difficulties. Relaxation of immigration controls. Having lots of immigrants come in to Italy means a big supply again of a factor of production, people, labour. We see that in Italy. You've got a lot of builders that are Romanian or Polish, and lots of Africans are working also on building sites or in farms, collecting fruit, etc. So, regardless of the moral issues and the political orientations, this does increase supply. And economics exists to analyze how to increase supply and maximize our resources. There's this little table, little map, concept map of different types of macroeconomic policy. So you've got the fiscal policy with its tools and objectives. So you've got the government spending and taxation for fiscal. And here the objective is to influence aggregate demand. Monetary policy, you've got the tools, interest rates, money supply and exchange rate, and credit regulations. And the objective again is to influence aggregate demand. And then you've got supply side policies. Again, you've got income tax, corporate tax, increase spending on education and training, trade unions, reforms. That's a bit controversial, so we didn't talk much about that. Privatization, deregulation, and support for technological improvement. And obviously this is to increase aggregate supply. So there's a little map for you to put things in perspective. Like I said, we can see here taxation and here taxation. So it's all about what the government's intending with its economic policy, whether it's a fiscal policy or a supply side policy, you know. Okay, generally with supply side policies, you're increasing supply, and so there should be higher employment. There should be more people needed, you know, whether it's to market production or, you know, even produce more, or you know, work in retail, etc. Also, it should reduce inflation. It should keep inflation down. Remember, the supply goes up, generally prices come down. So, or maybe the increases are reduced. So by increasing supply, we should have lower inflation and then higher national income and real output. So we should be richer. People should be earning more and enjoying a better standard of living. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about aggregate demand with aggregate supply. Generally, aggregate demand does increase over time. So here we can see it's gone from AD to AD1 to AD2. And if at the same time we can increase aggregate supply to AS1 and then AS2, we can avoid the inflation while increasing the output. So this would be avoiding the demand pull inflation. If demand goes up generally over time, there will be demand pull inflation unless we can increase the aggregate supply. So generally this should keep the economy in balance, or prices stable. Should we say prices stable? Because yes, you know, so all the time we need to be increasing education and using the latest generations of robots, etc. And this should keep prices very stable.